the Institute for Security Studies hosted a 90-minute discussion on South Africa's long-term developmental prospects under a government of national unity this morning. The ISS African Future teams presented a long-term forecast of the impact of various sectoral policies on income, poverty, growth and economic size over the next 2 decades. Joining us for more on this is Dr Jakkie Cilliers. He's board chair and head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute for Security Studies. Good evening, Doctor. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So you penned this particular report, which explores South Africa's growth path under the government of national unity, if of course it were to fully implement structural reforms. Just talk us through this report.
Yes, thanks very much. So we look out quite long term. We have a 2-decade-long forecast horizon. As we know, the next elections in South Africa is 2029, then 2034, and so on. But we modeled South Africa's current development trajectory, which is where we think the country is headed without structural reform. And that's quite a pessimistic story. Just to give you an idea, our average incomes, or GDP per capita, in South Africa peaked in 2013, and on the business as usual forecast, we think South Africa will only get back to its 2013 level in 2036. That is 23 years where we have not gone forward. And poverty doesn't really come down. In actual fact, the absolute numbers of extremely poor South Africans are likely going to increase. So on top of that, what we did, having looked at South Africa's current development trajectory, or its business as usual forecast, we then modeled the potential impact of 8 sectors: a positive engagement on agriculture, manufacturing, free trade, better education, better health, to see what could be possible in a high growth scenario. In that high growth scenario, South Africa recovers to its 2013 levels in 2030. So even under the best of circumstances, we are still, 6 years away from recovering to what GDP per capita was in 2013.
But perhaps the question becomes, how plausible is that high growth scenario?
It is unlikely that all good things will come together. You know, we're looking at a best case, and probably South Africa will do a little bit worse than what we are forecast. But it does show what is the potential. And it really undermines the importance of real deep structural change in taking the country forward on every conceivable measure, from health to education, from manufacturing to free trade. And getting the government of national unity behind pro-growth strategies that can take us and unlock development into the future.
And then on foreign direct investment, if we just look at the more conservative forecast, what does it reveal, at least your report?
So South Africa doesn't get much foreign direct investment. Investors don't have confidence in the country. So currently we get about 1.3% GDP on foreign direct investment. We pushed that up to over 4%. That's very aggressive by international standards. It makes a difference, but it's not enough. We also have to do lots of other things, fix our ports and our harbors, trade into the region. So foreign direct investment, that's been a focus of the presidency for several years, is important, partly because we have such low saving rates in South Africa, and we don't have the capital to invest. But it on itself, you need all these other components: manufacturing, investments in infrastructure, better education and health, to really get a coherent, rapid growth path for South Africa.
Now, in that very presentation, you offer recommendations to achieve the much needed sustainable growth and reduce inequality. Just talk us through some of these recommendations.
Yeah, so there are many recommendations that we make. We look at what the Center for Development and Enterprise have done they really emphasize the importance of getting cabinet leadership, the presidency, organized to drive growth, and we agree with that recommendation. In our forecast, improved governance has the second highest impact on reducing poverty, and also does very well in improving incomes, GDP per capita. So that's leadership, organization, dedication is one set. The others, the scenario that really can deliver the most growth in South Africa is trade into Africa. the full implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area can really unlock more rapid growth than any other scenario. But all the other things also have to happen. So on its own, it's insufficient.
So it's export-led growth. But how possible is it right now? Because when we talk beneficiation, again, some have reduced it to a buzzword, that ever so often it finds itself only existing in very well-written documents, but the implementation there has been very slow. So if you're going to talk about this export-led type of growth, how possible is it?
It's not going to deliver results around beneficiation. What would deliver results on export-led growth is an entry into what is referred to as low-end manufacturing and feeding that into the rest of Africa. We are the largest, most developed economy in Southern Africa. Southern Africa is the only region where we have a competitive advantage, where we can compete, for example, against China. So we must build the infrastructure and really exploit the growing African market. That's, in simple terms, where our largest potential dividend lies. And that is also one of the growing markets globally. So why don't we invest into the region where we can, where we have an advantage? So Continental Free Trade Area, free trade, building the infrastructure, embarking upon a growth trajectory into Africa is what we think has the most potential.
All right. Doctor, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That was Dr. Jakkie Cilliers. He's board chair, head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute for Security Studies.